Hey, what's going on, GameLeapers? This is Eggs, and in today's video, we're going to talk about the 10 best mid laners for patch 12.16. So these champions in the mid lane are the most dominant of forces at the moment, and they will continue to be that in 12.16 as well, which will be hitting the Rift in a day or so. So make sure you stick around for the whole video, because we're going to give you the builds, the runes, the summon spells, and if you do want to play any of these champions, guys, at the highest level, and the mid lane itself at the highest level, check out our Challenger courses and guides on our website, linked down below in the description and comment section. Top players and coaches from around the world are uploading daily videos to the site for our subscribers, so get that exclusive access by signing up, and let's get into the countdown. Now, starting off at number 10, if you want to play a kind of a short-range champion who's got one of the scariest ultimates in the game, then picking Swain in the mid lane is a very wise move. Swain with Liandry's Anguish, Sorcerer Shoes, Ryla's Crystal Scepter, deadly combination. Whether it's the tick damage from Liandry's, Ryla's only being 2600 gold these days, the HP from Ryla's as well making you tankier, and also your runes. By running Conditioning and then Overgrowth, it makes you very hard to kill in the mid to late game, because they are great scaling runes, and really when you play Swain, that is what you're about. Just make sure, guys, if you're going to play Swain, just copy down the rune page. We need Presence of Mind. We desperately need this mana restoration. And as far as your summoner spells go, you can see here that in the majority of games, picking Flash and Ghost is going to give you the highest win rate. And the reason for this, instead of something maybe like TP or maybe something like Ignite, if you went full aggro, Ghost is just a great scaling rune. And for a champion who wants to stick to the enemy champions too, think about Swain being short range, Ghost is going to allow you to do that. So this version of Swain is very scary indeed, and you guys playing Swain will certainly ascend in 12.16. But let's say you don't want to play a short range mid laner like Swain. Let's say you want to play with a bit more range. Well, picking Lux is a very wise decision. You can see these stats in Challenger across the world. For Lux in the mid lane, a 53.6% win rate or close to it in over 600 matches. Very respectable indeed. Now, why all of a sudden has Lux picked up a bit of steam in the mid lane? Well, that's because of that Scorch buff, right? So the extra damage this will be dealing, really useful, especially during the early laning phase. This is when your poke is pretty much unparalleled, right? With your Lucent Singularity, it's pretty much guaranteed to hit the enemy champion. Just make sure, guys, when you do use your E, you're using it against the enemy champion when they're looking to CS or they're locked into an animation themselves. So when you have it off cooldown, don't just press your E automatically. Also think about your mana flow band as well. If your mana flow band is a couple of seconds away from coming off cooldown, just hold on a little bit and then use your abilities. Now, as far as the domination tree goes, I know this is recommending Eyeball Collection and Relentless Hunter, but you can offer something where you're taking maybe Cheap Shot and Ultimate Hunter. You can even offer something like Inspiration with Biscuits and maybe Cosmic Insight. So there are a variety of runes you can go, and as far as your keystone goes, you can also go Arcane Comet over Summon Ahri. This page just has the best win rate in this elo, but it's only 20 matches, so I don't know how much you can trust it, but still Lux in the mid lane with an Emax into your Q, into your W, and with Luden's Tempest, Sorshoes, and Deathcap, the damage, the magic penetration. Very strong champion at the moment in the mid lane. Just be careful of playing against those assassins. Use your E wisely, and especially your Q. Wait until they jump in, wait until they use their cooldowns. That's your big defensive spell, so be very methodical when you're actually using it. Now, coming in at number 8, a champion who might like to play against Lux in the mid lane, this is Akshan. And the reason Akshan would like to play against Lux, or any mage for that matter who doesn't have the most mobility, is because Akshan has an amazing gap closer because of his heroic swing, and because of his amazing wave clear and priority, he can contest a lot of these ranged champions and actually just bully them out of lane. So by taking this rune page with Fleet Footwork, Presence of Mind, this gives you the HP regen because of Fleet, gives you mobility as well, right? So you can actually gap close to the enemy champion and get away from sticky situations, and Presence of Mind gives you the mana regeneration you kind of need. And another point of interest here, sudden impact in your domination tree as your secondary tree. Now, why this? Well, this is because of the buff to sudden impact in 12.14. This means that your mythic and core items you can see down below here with Eclipse and Ghostblade, these are 2 lethality items. And because sudden impact is going to work with your E, even though you're not maxing this, you will deal a ton of damage when you come out of it, especially when you do actually have Eclipse, and the armor penetration passive is so useful. Helps with your scaling, and you will be one-shotting anyone on the map. Just make sure you're taking Flash and Ignite, because with Ignite, it gives us so much kill pressure on anyone in the game. So if you want to play an attack damage mid laner, Akshan could well be the best of them. But ahead of Akshan coming in at number 7 on the countdown, honestly, probably the most blind pickable mid laner in the game. So if you are picking mid lane before the enemy team in Champ Select, picking Ahri is still a very wise move. And you can see that in Challenger across the world, to have close to a 51% win rate and picked in over 14% of games, so over 2,000 matches. This just goes to show, despite the nerfs, how good Ahri still is. And just like Lux, we are making use of the new buff Scorch. So by taking Mana Flow with Scorch, it gives us a bit more presence during the laning phase, because Ahri isn't as scary as she was when she did get initially buffed, but with Scorch it makes her poke. With your Q, your Orb of Deception, which you're maxing first, it's kind of annoying to get hit by, right? Because the extra tick damage now, it does stick with the enemy champions because there's less sustain in the game. Just make sure, guys, if you're picking Ahri in the mid lane, that you're using your E wisely, a bit like Lux with her Q. We don't just want to throw these out when we want to, yeah? We want to hold these for when the enemy champion engages, or for when our jungler ganks, or for when we think we can actually kill the enemy champion. We don't want to use this off cooldown. So make sure you think a little bit about that. And also, as far as your items go here, I know it's recommending Lucidity Boots with Everfrost and Zhonya's Hourglass. If you are the only AP on your team, do consider going a more maybe aggressive AP-oriented route with Luden's Tempest, maybe Sorcerer's Shoes, something like that, because you will deal so much damage to the enemy champions, dealing magic damage. If you have an AP jungler or an AP top laner, or even something like a Zyra support, something like this, you can offer a bit more utility, as you can see here with this build on your screen now. But regardless, Ahri, still a very good champion to pick in the mid lane for 12-16. Now, next up on the countdown, if you guys don't want to play Akshan in the mid lane, then this AD champion, Yone, might be the champ for you, and he is continuing to be a top tier mid laner, despite all of the changes to sustain, all of the changes to Scorch, right? So the laning phase for Yone for sure has become a little bit harder, but still by taking second wind, even though this got nerfed, and maybe something like Overgrowth here, right? For the actual mid to late game, you're kind of just like admitting, right, during the laning phase, I probably can't do that much, so let's try to aim for that mid to late game and get there as safely as possible. This is what this, and these stats are in Challenger, so it's not like 67 matches is a really unfair kind of sample space. This is legit. Just make sure, guys, when you are playing Yone, that you're maxing your Q and then your E second, W last, of course. The build as well hasn't really changed that much, so Berserkers, Shield Bow, Infinity Edge, and then going either GA or Death's Dance as your big third major item. It's really always been the case, so the champion might be a little bit worse off because of all the poke changes, right, and all the sustainers that I talked about, but for the most part, Yone innately is such a good champion, and in lower elos as well, you're going to get to that mid to late game more often, so make sure you run this setup. I also really like Teleport, because once again, your laning phase is weaker. Teleport is going to keep you in a game, because you can TP back to your tower after basing because you're low HP, and you can keep up with the enemy mid laner in terms of golden experience, so that's essential as well. But Yone fills the number 6 position, so what about the top 5? Well, starting off the top 5, another attack damage champion, but this one is getting buffed in 12-16, this being Irelia, and these buffs I think are going to be huge, because your armor per level getting buffed by 0.5 at each level is going to be big, especially in the mid to late game, right? So your laning phase, you're still a big threat to enemy champions, yeah? Because of your amazing gap closing, and still one-shot potential. Now, it is a little bit harder to kill enemy champions because of all the extra armor in the game that came about in 12.10. So we do have to take that into consideration, but you can see that across every elo here, Irelia is still banned in over 15% of games, so people really don't like playing against her. And also, she's getting more magic resist in the early game as well, so your base MR, that's going up to 30, so a 2 increase. This doesn't seem like too much, but it's going to be nice. Against all these Scorch abuses, you're not going to lose as much HP, you're going to be able to withstand the poke and look for more opportunities, and when those opportunities arise, you will be healthier. Just make sure you're taking Flash and Ignite and maxing your W second, not your E. So Irelia comes in at number 5. Now the number 4 position, this is boasted by, well, honestly, I think she's going to be the best AP champion in the game. Maybe the number 1 champion on this list might contest her for that title, but for Zoe, getting a buff next patch to your bubble troubles, so not just the base damage going up by 10, but also the AP ratio going up by 5%, this is going to be really deadly in the mid to late game. And also your W's minion drop rate, well, quite simply, you're going to be getting more summoner spells and more items off of minions. So this is kind of huge for Zoe. Well, it is huge, and I don't really know why Riot decided to buff her, because even right now she's doing extremely well, especially in higher elos where people really know how to use her kit, and by getting Sorcerer's Shoes followed by Luden's Tempest and then Shadow Flame, the magic penetration you have, you are going to one-shot anyone on the Rift, and because of the extra E damage you have, so your Sleepy Trouble bubble, champions are going to go boom. Now coming in at number 3, well, this champion might be someone who Zoe likes to play against, because you don't really give him that good of an ultimate, this of course being Sylas, who is still going to thrive in 12-16 because there are no nerfs to him. He's still going to be a very strong innate champion. So in over 1,000 games in high elo, you can see a 52.2% win rate. You're joking. How is this still allowed? We've got champions sitting on like 47% win rates for patches, if not seasons, and Sylas is still giga chilly. Now for Sylas, what's interesting here, a bit like Swain. With Conqueror, we need presence of mind. And then as far as your minor runes go, taking a cooldown shard, so ability haste, is actually really useful because your champion is all about ability haste. This gives you a bit more power during the laning phase, so it helps you out during the early game, because your early game is weaker, right? Because health potions and refillables got nerfed, you're not going to get back as much HP as you were before. But apart from that, guys, just make sure you're maxing your W and then your E and then your Q. You're stealing the important ultimates during those fights, and you should be Gucci. Like, I don't really see the issue here. Sylas again, gonna be nuts. He comes in at number 3 for 12-16. Now the runner-up for 12-16, I mentioned this champion earlier as being a really good counter to Zoe, right? And a bit like Zoe, well, you can run this on Zoe, but also Ahri, we've talked about in Lux, Zed is thriving with the new Scorch buff. So because Scorch is dealing more damage, right, I'm sure you've all played against Zed, unless you are one of those players who permabans him, and respect, but it really does stick with you. Once you get hit by a W-E-Q combo, even if the Zed doesn't land both of his Razor Shurikens, you can't really replenish that HP anymore because of the nerfs to sustain, right? So if you're running something like Second Wind, if you've got a health potion there, you really can't withstand the poke that Zed actually has. And because of the kill threat he then has, after that initial trade, it's extremely hard to beat this guy in lane. Also, because Zed runs 3 health potions, most champions are probably going to have 2, right? If they have a Doran's Ring, or maybe 1 if they have D-Shield, something like this. So Zed has more sustain, maybe the most burst poke damage in the game because of that WQE combo, and because of the changes to the lethality items, where they're giving you more movement speed for each major item you have, this makes him even deadlier in the mid to late game. Just make sure, guys, if you are going to play Zed, that you're working the enemy's vision. Don't just run through mid lane and show on a minion wave when you're trying to assassinate someone. Work in the shadows. The Unseen Blade is the deadliest after all. But the number 1 champion, guys, for 12-16 who would love to play against Zed, or probably anyway, this is Vex. And the reason Vex does so well in solo queue, well, there's a bunch of reasons for this. The Q bus a few patches ago, where it's on a 4-second cooldown at rank 5, so in other words at level 9, 4 seconds for your Mistral Bolt, kinda crazy. Also the extra AP ratio in it, so once you do start building ability power from items, you're going to be hitting like a truck. Also Vex, because of her mobility with her ultimate, you can gap close to those fights. Just make sure you're trying to use your Shadow Surge from Fog, or you're trying to use it when the enemy champions are CC'd. And it's also a good idea to try to combine your Shadow Surge with your passive. So as your passive, when it's charged up, your Doom and Gloom, bang, use your W, because it's impossible to miss, and the enemy champion is feared. This guarantees your E, and then your Q, and the rune page that's recommended here with Biscuits and then Cosmic Insight. The reason you don't need to go Scorch, I mean you can, so if you're going Mana Flow Ban and Scorch, for sure do it, but Vex you run out of mana very quickly, especially because you want to be lane dominant, right? So by running Corrupting Potion with Biscuits and then with Cosmic Insight, it lets you stay in lane for longer and bully the enemy champion out of it. You are probably the best champion at doing that at the moment, so do consider that when you go into your games. But Vex, guys, is going to be the number 1 mid laner for another patch for 12-16. Any comments, any thoughts, leave them down below in the comment section. And if you did enjoy the video, remember to leave a like down below. And until our next Season 12 upload, this has been a... Peace.